Is your life cluttered? If you can look in your garage, you'll probably get a good sense. Maybe you have an attic, a basement. If it's cluttered, it's probably going to lend itself to knowing what your personality type is. My name is Jeff Miles. This is the Manument Podcast with financial advisor Glenn Johnson. You can find all of his information at jbezfinancial.com. Also encourage you to subscribe to the podcast, but also go to the website at themanumentpodcast.com. We've got all the different clips of all the different episodes that we're doing to get you more educated. But today, Glenn, we're talking about the garage. Can you even pull the car into the garage?
Well, most of the time, no.
Right.
I'll tell you. And if you're asking me personally, I've got an excuse.
As we all do, I'm sure, right?
And I can throw my wife under the bus on this one. She's got all of her chicken supplies in there. And the occasional chicken if it's roosting or something, and it needs to be in isolation for a little while.
So for you, it's the garage / chicken coop at the same time.
On occasion, yep.
That's great. Well, a lot of people, I would say, there's an article that was done by actually, Stanley Black & Decker, found that more than a third of Americans say that their garage is so cluttered that it blocks any vehicle from coming in. And nearly 2 in 3 people call their garage the junkiest space in their house. Right. I have to imagine that a lot of people, if you're not working with the right financial advisor, or maybe you think you're doing this on your own, you're going to DIY, this might be the kind of thing where if you looked in your garage, you could probably see the things that you should have outsourced. Your retirement plan, it may be something that if it's so cluttered, you have no idea how that can affect what your actual retirement is going to look like once you get to that point. And many times, not saying that it's ever going to be too late, but it could affect how those things go if you don't know where the clutter is, correct?
That's right. There's a reason why we don't clean the garage. It's just not high enough on the priority list.
Correct.
It's just not, we're just not there.
Right.
There's so many other things that are more important. That's what we end up paying attention to.
I'll get to it next weekend.
That's right. And it's funny. Every profession has their own things that they don't pay attention to. And I remember years ago, I put together a financial plan for a CPA.
Okay.
And the CPA's worst nightmare is when somebody hands them a box of receipts and says, okay, sort this out.
Have fun.
Well, this CPA gave me a box of financial statements. I have this account here, this account there, piles of savings bonds and an IRA here and there. It was a mess. And here they were a CPA. So it's kind of like this. So what happens over time? How does the garage accumulate stuff? Well, you have something and you don't know where to put it. Right. And so it ends up in the garage. Just put it over there, put it over there. And as time goes by, that's how people live their lives financially. Mm-hmm. I worked at this company. I have a little 401k hanging out over here. I picked up an IRA over there. I had an extra couple $1,000, so I stuck it in the bank over here. And now you have all of this stuff that's just accumulated over the years, all these different tools, and you don't even know if they're working together. Now, because it's not a priority to people and they have absolutely no interest in it whatsoever, right, they just kind of leave it alone. It comes down to like what's important versus what's urgent.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of people, when they look at their garage, they think, well, this isn't urgent. I've got something else going on this weekend that needs my attention. And so it's kind of like the proverbial kicking the can down the road, and you just keep kicking it.
Right. And so I like to explain it this way. You've got things that are important and urgent. And those are things that they got your attention and you have to do it now. Sure. Then you've got things that are important, but they're not urgent. It's something I've got to get to this, but I don't have to do it right now. And then you also have things that are unimportant and unurgent.
Those have the cobwebs on them.
But also those can be the most fun.
Exactly.
Let's watch your favorite TV show or whatever else. But in the same respect, you have things that are urgent and unimportant. Right. Like a telemarketer call. It's not important, but it's urgent. Answer me. Right. So when we think about taking care of our financial future, that's important. And it may not be urgent right now, but left unattended to or
Right.
left neglected, it will become urgent. And so its importance never changes. It's just a matter of, are we going to wait until it reaches a point of crisis before we pay attention to it? Or will we recognize its significance and importance and intentionally prioritize it?
It's interesting how you are describing this, because as you're speaking through all of this, I'm starting to look at that garage, right? And I'm starting to see it as I've got a lot of stuff in my garage right now. And it may not be necessarily, because I know for a lot of people, there's almost this sense of, well, if you're telling me I have to clean out my garage, you're also telling me I need to get rid of a bunch of stuff. That may not necessarily be the case. It may be just an organization of what's going on inside your garage and putting things in the right places. Like, I've got my lawn and garden equipment over here. I've got my car tools over here. And right now, they're all mixed up in the same place. And I have to think that that's a tough place for the average person to look at with their financial plan, their retirement plan, and be able to discern, well, these need to kind of split and go in these other places.
See, and when it's a mess, it's hard to decipher what's valuable and what isn't, because it all kind of mixed together. And the hoarding, I guess you could even look at it. And a lot of that is fear-based. I mean, if you look in your garage and you found all these scraps of wood and you couldn't put them together and make one 8-foot 2x4, chances are you're holding on to stuff you don't need, right?
Exactly.
And so this is where, when we go through our finances, a lot of it's wasteful, and sometimes we don't want to give those things up out of fear. Like, for example, in some cases, well, maybe I won't buy 3 Starbucks coffees every day.
Right.
Exactly. There's some of the fat we can cut out of the budget, but if we're emotionally attached to making sure I have those Starbucks coffees all day long, it's harder to separate from that.
Sure.
But when you recognize that the end result is having some financial organization and creating some financial peace, once you see a path to saying, okay, I can get this organized. And in fact, I'll tell you, sometimes we need to hire someone to come in and clean our house for us.
Sure.
It's just beyond us. And in the process, like I've done that in the past. I've hired somebody to come in, organize my house, organize my basement, organize my shelves. Actually, I had someone once come into my kitchen and say, all right, well, put stuff where it would make sense to put it. But then once it was established, then I knew where to put things back. And so
did you find yourself more at peace at that point, where you knew where things went and you didn't just look at your kitchen, let's say, and say, well, I don't know where everything goes, so I'm just going to leave it as is, just kind of out and scattered about?
Absolutely. It's kind of like, all right, I have a client of mine who's a kitchen designer, and he designed 2 kitchens for me and 2 of my houses. And it worked out great because he was a professional and he did a spectacular job. Yeah. Very happy with it. And then once that was set up, in the first house, I had somebody come in and say where to put things. So I hired help. And knowing that we're all ignorant on a different set of subjects, and personally, I do absolutely no work in the kitchen at all.
Right.
But I like having it well prepared.
Sure.
And that's where it comes into play, where you can get your finances put in order once you know where to put them, why they're put where they are, why things are allocated the way they are, and you actually have a better understanding of it. It like you said, it brings a lot of financial peace.
Right. Do you think that there's ever a time when you're looking into your retirement plan that maybe you've had something in your retirement plan for a very long time, let's say, the same way that you may have something stored away in your garage, and then you realize that as you're cleaning out the garage, or someone comes in to see you as a financial advisor and you're kind of cleaning up their retirement plan, that they may have stuff in there that's obsolete, so to speak. Or maybe it just doesn't make sense right now based off of the current situation. And had they just kind of known to look for that in their garage and maybe move it, you could have made some space for something that is much more valuable.
Right. I mean, there's seasons. So a lot of times people have an emotional attachment to a particular stock if they worked for the company for a long time.
Sure.
And so even after they retire, they want to hold on to that stock. And I can understand keeping some of it, but to be 100% invested in their former employer's stock no longer is a responsible move.
Right.
And there's different seasons, just like a child to go to a pediatrician. Then you need an internist as you get older and an elder care provider when you get older. There's different seasons and different advisors. And what worked at one time, it's not necessarily working later in life. So the financial tools, like when you're young and you have a family and you have a term life insurance policy, fantastic. However, that's not something you need when you're 80.
Right.
And what's amazing is that so many of these financial decisions and healthy habits parallel every other aspect of life.
Yes.
I take a look at the habits and the characteristics that make somebody popular in high school does not serve them when they get out into the real world. Right?
Is that too, right? Yeah.
Yes,
You're absolutely
exactly.
right.
So what worked at one time, it may not be the right season for it. So like during your accumulation years, while you're working and you're setting money aside and you're maxing out your 401k, you're adding money to a Roth IRA perhaps as well. You're making all the right decisions during your accumulation years, but it is remarkable how significantly things changed the moment you step out of work and you go into the distribution years and you start taking an income out. It is a radical change in your objective, your allocations, and everything.
I talk to a lot of people about music, and as we're talking about the garage and music and things that maybe you've had in there for, I don't know, the last 30, 40, maybe 50 years, you may have 8 tracks that are stored in your garage somewhere, and you don't even remember that they're in there, right? But they're just collecting dust, and as great as they were 40, 50 years ago, today you can find streaming music in your little bitty phone compared to that 8-track, and it's a much more efficient way to listen to music. And just from a comparison of efficiency versus, what's going on today and how we consume something like music or even television, whatever it may be, I have to imagine that there are some of the same kinds of things in the financial industry as people are preparing for their retirement that they could look at. And maybe there's some things that have been, they were great 40, 50 years ago.
And that's the thing. I think back of the financial recommendations that I was making 20 years ago.
Sure.
The tools that I was using back then are significantly different than the tools that I'm using now. And this is where I think back about when I first got into the financial industry and why did I do so well right out of the gate? And I did really well as soon as I started in this industry because I had read so many books on financial principles, everything from The Richest Man in Babylon to Millionaire Mentality. And so I understood the principles, and then I needed to learn the tools of the trade. Mm-hmm. And when I applied the tools to the principles, it worked out well. But so the reason I bring that up is principles don't change. Tools do. So when the right principles are in place, now as you go from one season to the next and you form the right principles with the right habits, that doesn't mean all changes need to cease. You keep the principles, but you still may need to change the tools you're using, which is why it's so important to stay current.
If I were to try to use the same parallel when it comes to music, those 8 tracks that you have in your garage that are collecting dust, the very songs that are on those 8 tracks, it doesn't mean you have to change the songs that you love. Those songs are actually just in a different form now, digitally on your phone, and it's a much more efficient way to go get your favorite songs, so your principles, so to speak.
That's funny. That reminds me of the time my dad used to have this old Cadillac with an 8-track player. And I remember
Yes.
listening to the Steve Miller Band in there. And I think, oh, this is great. And I thought it was fantastic. Here I am, 16 years old, driving this ship down the highway, listening to a Steve Miller Band 8-track.
Got the Joker playing in the background. The windows are rolled down. And
And then when I was in high school, my friend was telling me, it's like, one of these days you're just going to you're going to think of a song you want to hear. And all of a sudden, bam, it'll be playing in your car. I thought he was nuts, but that's how we live now.
That's exactly where we are now. It's amazing.
That's right.
Well, listen, if you need some financial advice, maybe you need to clean out your retirement garage. There's a little bit too much clutter in there. Financial advisor Glenn Johnson would love to help you work on that plan. And again, it doesn't mean you have to change what your favorite song is. Maybe there's just a different way to listen to it. So go check out the website at jbezfinancial.com. Again, that's jbezfinancial.com. TheManumitPodcast.com, where we have all of these episodes. Make sure you like it and subscribe it. You'll get the updates that says a new one is coming out for you. And Glenn, this has been very educational for me personally, but I'm sure for so many people out there, especially as you do look at clutter. There's so much clutter in our lives in so many different areas. And I think that as we get older and older and as time goes on, that clutter just seems to mount on top of us and it becomes a little intimidating at times. And sometimes we're just kind of, whether it's you're too lazy to do something about it, or kind of like you were saying earlier, there's this apprehension. It's almost like you're not wanting to almost someone else to take it away from you, so to speak. That's not what it's about. It's about finding proper planning.
That's right. And sometimes if you can just bite the bullet and know that you're not alone going through it. And this is where sometimes when I've mentored some young people when they're starting off even in business, and it works with finances too.
Sure.
Sometimes we need to pigtail on somebody else's confidence.
Yes.
So you may not feel confident that you may be able to sort all of this out, but you can ask yourself, well, do you think I can do it?
Yeah.
Well, you know what? Yes, I most certainly can do it. And then we can think about, well, if I can do it, well, maybe we could do it.
Yeah, exactly.
And so this is where I want to work with my clients through the process. And as we uncover these things, it's a learning experience for them, but also in the process of unpacking, literally unpacking the garage, as you would say.
Sure.
They'll actually, it's surprising how more confident in themselves they can become, because they can realize that, things are not as bad as they were, as they were concerned about.
Right.
People have done better than they think. They just have to learn how to put it together. And then they can sit back and think, you know what? I have worked hard. I have done well. I do have what I need to live confidently through the rest of my years. And a lot of the times that fear of uncertainty, that also keeps people from cleaning out their financial garage.
And you need a cheerleader in the process a lot of times. And, someone that can root you along that knows from experience, but also that knows from just having seen many different garages, I guess you would say.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that you do very well, Glenn. Well, listen, thank you so much for spending the time again. This has been an awesome episode, especially when we're talking about unpacking some of these items that may have been stored in our financial garage that it's time to really start to look at. For Glenn Johnson, financial advisor, I'm Jeff Miles. Thank you so much for listening.
Investment advisory services offered through Jabez Financial LLC, a registered investment advisor firm. Registration is not an endorsement by securities regulators. By contacting us, you may be provided with information about insurance products, including annuities, offered through Glenn Johnson Connecticut Insurance, license number 4628409. The firms are separate entities. Annuity guarantees rely on the financial strength and claims-paying ability of the issuing insurance company and are not offered by Jabez Financial LLC. Read your contract for restrictions, limitations, or penalties. Jabez Financial LLC is not licensed in all 50 states. To find out if Jabez Financial LLC is licensed in your state, please call 860-390-0093.